Welcome back to the Pull Up Trey podcast. I am Trey. This is Samson, as always, and we have a new guest, someone that has been on the podcast before. I like to refer to him as my son. I'm Raptors Republic. He might be called the Rookie of the Year. Nice budding star on the team.
I'm
Makai
crying.
Bruce, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm chilling, bro. I'm happy to be with such famous people right now.
Famous. I would not say that.
Nah, it's
I
fame. Y'all got fame.
We were saying before the podcast, Kai and I, that you're the financier for all the Mr. Beast videos, is what
I
we
did
were
hear
hearing
that.
today. So this is obviously we're right on the heels, I suppose, of All-Star Weekend. And that means that yes, we're gonna talk a little bit about All-Star Weekend, but coming up we have the Poeltl trade because Trey and I haven't talked about it. I know he has opinions. Kai obviously has opinions. Some people have heard mine. There's a starting lineup question heading into the, out of the All-Star break as well. The team as a whole, lots of stuff to talk about. We'll start with the All-Star Weekend. If I could get like a short soliloquy from everybody on what they thought, Kai, we'll start with you, Rookie of the Year, little superstar that you are. What do you think of All-Star Weekend?
I mean, night one was cool. The celebrity game was pretty funny. Richard Jefferson was doing a lot of funny stuff, and the celebrity all star game was, fine. And the Rising Stars game, Jose Alvarado had the greatest mic'd up performance ever. He kept, cursing a bunch and just, and everybody's saying like, oh, he's an old man. Like, why is he playing? But I thought it worked out pretty well. And then, Saturday night, it was cool. The skill challenge obviously was trash. But three-point contest, Dame, did his thing. The dunk contest, Mac McClung did his thing. So, and then, obviously Sunday the game sucked. So overall, I would say it's like a 5.8 out of 10.
Oh yeah.
Damn. Actually, Kai, I want to ask you this because this was a moment, and I wonder if it was for you, Trey, as well, that once you're older than most of the players who are getting drafted, because you called Jose Alvarado an old man, was this a moment in your life, Trey? And then have you noticed that this moment has come and gone for you, Kai, that you're older now than most of the players when they get drafted? And like you spend most of your life, it's like these guys are men to you, but now they're kids, you know? What's that like?
I think like for me, it's kind of crazy because I'm late 20s, so like probably like around Makai's age, you would think that like Pascal Siakam is like ancient, for example. But like
Well, he's
he's
our
really
agent, and Kai calls us ancient.
that
He
is
calls
true.
us
He
old
does
man
call
all
us
the time.
ancient, but like he's really not that old. But like when you're like 17, 18, around that range, like you don't even like conceptualize getting that old. But now like Scottie Barnes coming in, you're like, of course he's on Twitch. He's a child. So it's like that switch in mindset, I think, definitely does happen.
What's it like for you, Kai?
Yeah, I mean, a few years back, it would be like, oh man, like this guy's getting drafted. He's a grown man. Like that must be crazy. And now to like be older than the guys, like it don't really make me view them any differently right now because I'm only 20 and they're gonna be like 18, 19 coming into the draft. But when I look at like Jose Alvarado age, I'm like, man, like what's he like 25, 26? I look at his age in the Rising Stars game, I'm like, man, that is an old dude to be playing with all these kids. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good place to I guess. Trey, your thoughts on All Star Weekend?
All
Is
right.
it higher than 5.8? What's the deal?
Big. I'll keep mine short. Big takeaways. I think it's clear like the Elam ending doesn't necessarily work. It adds like certain intrigue, especially like late towards the game, but like the players have to try, obviously, for it to work. And I think obviously the stuff with Kobe happened right along with the ending that happened, which kind of gives I think a lot of us false hope of what the All Star game probably could be, and expectations have been higher. So I think like moving forward, either A, like there needs to be more incentive, or B, reduce like the seriousness of the game, sort of similar to like the NFL has, and turning into like a flag football game, where it's for kids and it should be fun. And I think Saturday I was actually surprised about how good the dunk off was. And I think big takeaway from that is I think people just kind of want to see cool dunks. Like obviously the big names heading into it would be nice. You want to see Ja, Anthony Edwards do those type of dunks, but Mac McClung did a 540 and won the whole thing, which is a dunk we probably haven't seen, which is super crazy. And everyone's still raving about it. So I think if you get people who actually are doing dunk, not Jericho Sims. Also, never again, never bring that man back. But if you have people that are specialized in this and do it really well, I think there's still some excitement that you can get from that event. So those are my like 2 or 3 big takeaways.
Yeah, Kai, he mentioned at the start that we were famous, but the guy who's actually famous, who for anybody listening, will be on to talk with me about his experience at All Star Weekend. But Esfandiar, our friend S, sharing a flight with Mac McClung, probably both of them seated right at the front of the plane, first class, I would assume. So that's a
Of
fun
course.
little footnote. I'm excited to hear more about that in the future. The thing for me was the leg and I were watching it together. I did this long walk, and I came back and they were introducing the guys. And then I went for another long walk and I came back and they hadn't started the game yet. And I was like, damn, this takes a long time. They had the draft, they had all that stuff going on. It started at like what, quarter after 9?
Yeah.
So it's late, especially if it's going to be for kids. I don't know. Maybe, geez, I sound old right now. I'm going to just skip ahead. Oleg and I were watching the game like, damn, they're not really playing hard at all. And he said, I wish they would just try and like SWAT dudes, really go for blocks and everything. And as you guys well know, Oleg is what's referred to as a LeBron stan. He loves
Mhm.
LeBron. His relation to the NBA, his fandom revolves around how good LeBron is doing. If LeBron is king of the league, Oleg is watching all the games. If he's not, he doesn't know what's happening. So LeBron All-Star Weekend, he got injured trying to block Pascal Siakam. And it was really funny because Oleg was just making a big stink about how players need to do that. Then his guy got injured. I couldn't believe it. Yeah, it was boring. I was, after having enjoyed quite a few different, I guess, aspects of All-Star Weekend over the past, I don't know, 5, 6 years. Some years like the skills challenge has been fun when it like brought big guys for the first time and you saw like a big dude hustling, bustling down, like the throw ahead dribble, go get it, all that kind of stuff. The 3-point competition, the dunk competition, every 3 years you get a good one. The game into 2020, obviously, this is a Raptors podcast. Everybody wants to hear us say that Kyle Lowry made the All-Star game good, so I'll just hit the quota. That's what it was. But it was bad this year, man. I couldn't believe how zoned out of it I was. There was nothing engaging going on. And so we'll leave that there. For anybody who really enjoyed it, I guess comment and tell us why we're wrong or why it was awesome if you thought it was. But I suspect that's not the case. Jakob Poeltl. He makes, in my opinion, the Raptors significantly more fun for for the short term. I've enjoyed his presence on the team very much. There was a cost to that trade. We're going to talk about basically all of that. And I want to start with Trey because he was part of the Pull Up Trey podcast episode that we had S, where we said, would you rather trade Fred VanVleet or give up a first round pick for a something this season? All three of us said we would rather get a first round pick and trade Fred VanVleet for a first round pick was the question. And what we got instead was a first round pick, top 6 protected for the next 4 years. After that it conveys a second round pick this year, the Raptors, and a second round pick next year. So that's what was traded for Jakob Poeltl and Khem Birch as well. Trey, thoughts on the trade?
There's I'll just like preface this. There's like very few times where my smile has been taken by this team. This is the fourth time my smile's been taken. The first time is when Kobe scored 81. This the
How
second time
how old were you when that happened?
I think that was like I want to feel like that was like 2008. I want to say. So what was I? Probably like
2006, I think, right?
2006. So I would have been like 11. 11.
Damn.
I
Jesus.
turned the TV off. I was very mad.
It was like the meme, the Philadelphia meme after the Raptors won and the kids are just like walking around the house crying. Was that was that
Oh, I
you?
was so upset, especially because like Chuck Scorsese like said like the game is over. He said his famous line like maybe like early third quarter, and then Kobe scored a million points after, and we lost the game. That
Damn.
was time number one. The second time is where the Wizards swept us. I never thought basketball could get
Oh,
worse.
game 3, DeMar scored 20 points in the first quarter and I was like, "Okay, we're getting one." And we lost that game. I couldn't,
Mm.
I couldn't believe it, dude.
Oh, Luwo broke my heart. The third time is when we lost to the Cavs in 2018 because I was super positive we were going to win. There was no doubt in my mind. I told every person I knew we were going to win the series. But it was LeBron. And then this is the fourth time. And the biggest reason is that obviously you wanted them to pick a direction heading into the deadline, whether they're selling or whether they're buying. And they obviously chose to buy, and they're keeping this core together to some degree. But it hasn't significantly changed their aspect and towards like where they can achieve in the standings or even like contend in the future. And they've also decided, like Masai kind of alluded like in his press conference, that they've looked at several of these other drafts and they feel like it's going to be they're going to get a great return based on what they're seeing in next year's draft. But also in previous drafts, Ja Morant was an unknown prospect and he became a second round pick and a superstar. Cade Cunningham comes on late, becomes a can't miss first overall pick. Stuff like that happens, and the Raptors didn't give themselves protection in those circumstances. Like the pick is only top 6 protected, and they're making a huge assumption that they're going to either A contend or B, even if they fall within that 7 to 8 or 10 pick, that pick isn't going to be good. So I just think like the odds of like the lack of protection that they gave with the Poeltl trade, a forces them to have to try to make some moves for like a star in the future because the team is getting really expensive for heading near the tax and they've never paid the tax before. And then
Except for they paid the tax in the championship year.
okay, they paid the
Yeah.
tax in the championship year. And then also B, you're heading into a contract year at Pascal Siakam, so you need to obviously present a team that can contend in the future because we're basically going to be signing him for his prime years and the best years of his career. So overall, I would say we're gonna get more clarity in the summer, but right now I would say the Spurs robbed us 2 years in a row.
Damn. Kai, I need your thoughts, brother.
Yeah, when I first saw the trade, it was when I woke up like 3 a.m. and after I saw the KD news, I'm like, like they got a center now, a center like that they're familiar with, and then they were like, oh, the protections didn't come out yet, so I'm like, oh, and then my assumption was that it would be like, you know what I'm saying, like good protections, like it wouldn't be some like crazy protections like that it turned out to be, and then when I saw the protection was it's just top 6, right?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, I was like, maybe they can like stretch it like to like top 14 protected, maybe like top 10. But when I saw top 6, I was like man, like that's a crazy protection to get. But like you said, in the near future, Jakob obviously makes the team better. He just adds a new element to the team that they were missing, for the entire season. And I just think that it was probably a mistake to really just give away all the picks like that, and just the weird way that if it doesn't convey, it turns into another first, and it turns into another first after that. So just the way that the protections went made this deal just look a lot more ugly for me.
Hmm. So the interesting thing is that for me, in my coverage, I'm probably not gonna, I guess, be like too caught up about it because it makes the team way more fun this season. There'll be way more interesting things for my job to write about, and it makes the team more compelling. But the question I don't think is about how good they are now, really, because everybody understands that this probably isn't a championship contending team. That Jakob Poeltl solidifies them as probably, hey, damn, Kobe, he's got something to say. Um, so anyway, he solidifies them as a team that is capable of winning games, certainly, and the center position is really important in the NBA. But the thing is, this locks the Raptors into a really expensive version of the team. This also costs a decent amount of draft capital, and to go back to that point, they probably don't have a significant ceiling. And the Raptors are a team that, if you're going to be paying the tax, which they did the championship season, if they're going to be sold on I guess, the pairing of Scottie and Pascal, you have to want to be good. You have to want to be all these different things. And the Raptors are still currently trying to navigate two timelines, merge them together. Jakob Poeltl certainly is, people will view that as leaning more towards Pascal's timeline, let's say. But I think it's also important for Scottie Barnes to play next to a good center and not have to like guard up against guys all the time. And so I think the trade was imperfect, and I think that there's a reason a lot of people, analysts, fans, when they saw that trade happen, they thought more was coming because they thought that this seems kind of like a directionless trade for the future of the Raptors, not necessarily this season, but the future of the Raptors if they don't follow this up with anything, especially with all of the turmoil reported around roles, expectations, and drama around the team. All this did was make them better this year. I enjoy good basketball, but it puts a lot of pressure on them this summer. And I think like they kicked the can down the road. They paid a first round pick, a second this year, and a second next season to kick the can down the road. If they knock it out of the park in the summer, I talked with Sam Vecini. We did a podcast. He suggested, he was like, it seems like the Raptors could be star hunting this summer. They look to make that big package. They don't have next year's first round pick, but they can do what the Lakers do and package the 2027, 2029 and tell people this is really great. You're going to love this. These are super good picks or something like that. But I think I'm for my job, I'm happy with it because it's way more interesting to cover Jakob Poeltl playing with all these different guys. And everybody here wanted to see the Raptors players next to a center. I know that for certain, and most fans did. I think it also signifies the end of the Vision 6-9 thing, which I was praying for. I know Masai tried to have it both ways and act like this is a continuation of the 6-9 thing. Not allowed. Okay, you can't have it both ways like that. But I think that they paid a pretty heavy cost. If they re-sign Jakob, if they it, this is tangentially related to what they do in the summer because they didn't change the ceiling that much this season. They'll be fun this season. We'll enjoy it. I'm getting long-winded here, but the real decisions come in the summer. Does anybody disagree with that? And if not, what would you like to see them do in the summer? I suppose.
Hmm, I'll jump in. In the summer, like they certainly have to star on the major questions that I have is like their ability to do so.
Yeah,
Is because obviously by holding on to the team, you know that Fred and Gary are most likely opting out of their. They'd be dumb if they didn't. If they opt out of their contracts, which makes them far less valuable and harder to trade in sign and trade situations. And then it appears that either OG is heading for free agency and possibly leaving, or there's just some sort of turmoil there based on the rumors that we've seen. So that probably makes him less likely, harder to trade in a star package. And also just because he has 1 year left and everyone knows that he wants to leave, how many picks are how many picks would they really be willing to give up to get a star when Masai's never really shown that inkling of doing so? So that's probably like the major questions I have. And I'm assuming if it is a major star that it would have to include Scottie in order to get it done. And that's certainly something I'm open to. I just am confused in how they attempt on getting to that path.
it's definitely a tough position to be in because that is the thing about OG is that if you're going to trade OG Anunoby, you I want them to keep OG, quite frankly. But if you're going to trade him, he will be significantly more valuable if the team trading for him knows on this contract they get 2 playoff runs with OG Anunoby. Now they only get one, guaranteed. And OG is the exact type of player. He hits his threes, he defends like hell, and he can oscillate between like the lowest usage, just hit your threes, and then a little bit more usage, which is really valuable in the playoffs. That's what teams were paying for. That's what they wanted. But when it comes to this, it's like, well, you just took away a playoff run from the asking price. And that really affects what teams will be willing to give. We heard for a long time, it's like 3 first round picks. There's no way that'll be the case going forward, I don't expect. And then, yeah, the Fred and Gary stuff. There's just a lot going on in the summer. Kai, any thoughts on the summer before we, I guess, talk a little bit about something else?
Yeah, I thought that them keeping Fred and keeping OG is kind of going to look bad in some because now Fred is going to probably opt out of his deal. And like you said, OG is probably headed for free agency because it's been reported, I don't want to make anybody mad, but the reports have said that OG is, unhappy with his role and would like, more for himself. So it doesn't seem like he wants to resign with the team. So teams are obviously going to be looking at that and they're going to say, why am I giving all these picks for a guy who's probably going to be available, next summer? So I think overall the price, the price points for everybody is probably going to go down this summer.
Yeah. It just comes back to it is the summer. If you judge this trade as like a standalone, the standalone for me is that the basketball is going to be better. They are going to make the playoffs, and that's good. I enjoy that. I think most fans will enjoy that. But again, when you're talking about the ceiling of the team, it got a little bit murkier. The path you choose to, I guess, go down is a little bit more muddled now. And speaking of roles, OG, Gary, Precious, Poeltl, everybody who's impacted by this will be impacted somewhat by the starting lineup. And the Raptors, after not doing a consolidation trade, after not doing, okay, we're going to trade this guy because he wants to go, they could have simplified things that way. But what they did was they added, with draft capital, a pretty damn good player in Jakob Poeltl, who's going to start for the team. The little bit of small sample size we have, they're very good with Poeltl on the court. They're winning minutes. They're gonna win minutes this season. They also started him next to Precious Achua. I know all present company loves that front court, has a lot of fun with it. They're a weird big team when they start both those guys, but there's no way that's the case. What is the starting lineup going to be, considering they have five guys who average over 15 points? They have Precious Achua, who on most teams that are below 500, most teams would want to try and start him because of his ceiling. And then you have Jakob Poeltl, who's definitely starting despite not being in that high scoring company. Kai, we'll start with you. What do you think is going to be the starting lineup post All Star break?
I think probably the starting lineup post All Star break, considering everybody is healthy, is probably Fred, Gary, Scottie, Pascal, and Jakob for me because I think what hot.
OG
OG
off
had
the
an
bench?
Oh, yeah, I'm tripping. Bench Gary and put OG. I'm tripping.
Oh,
That's my
okay.
bad. But yeah, probably Gary and Precious to the bench because, we've seen Gary off the bench this season. It worked out really well. He didn't seem to have a problem coming off the bench. He still, gets his shots, plays off everybody really well. And the reason I say you bench Precious is because Precious in the lineup was really to alleviate some of the issues we had with size. And now that we have, Jakob Poeltl at center, we don't have that, the same need for Precious to be in the lineup. It doesn't. We have Jakob to take, pressure off of guys like Pascal and OG to like guard, the rim. So I think, and for development reasons, it's better that Precious, is able to like experiment more in those bench lineups, and it's just better overall for the team going forward.
Yeah, I think that's probably, if I had to guess, Trey, are you of the same wisdom?
Yeah, the exact same lineup. I think we've all seen like this season that like starting Fred, Gary, and Scottie together to be your main source of point of attack defense isn't viable anymore. So one of those people needs to be on the bench. And obviously, Fred has been shooting way too well, and obviously has been passing the ball really well as a playmaker. So he needs to start. Um, I think the only like confusion would probably be like how much do you value Scottie's development? Because this lineup doesn't necessarily pertain to focusing on him developing and furthering along as like a potential on ball creator. Like Jakob is going to take away a lot of those elbow and DOH looks that he does really well. That's kind of woke up Scottie and helped his season go along. But if they're just looking for in terms of winning, and they should be because they traded a first round pick, but benching Gary and Precious and allowing them to probably flex their muscles with creation off the bench is the most viable way. And I think that lineup, that starting five will probably be a top 10 defense, considering when OG's back, considering the amount of size, length, and speed they actually have with both Pascal and OG being able to switch out, knowing that they have Jakob as a rim protector.
I do think it'll be really interesting to see what the closeouts look like, how far they pinch in on drives, especially at the nail, and yeah, it just what tagging looks like in the pick and roll because you're in the NBA, you're going to defend a ton of pick and roll. How high they ask Pirtle to play all season in the pick and roll, or how low, and then how much help they send from either the weak or strong side because sometimes they do strong side, even though that's atypical for the NBA. I will take this moment to say that Gary has impressed me endlessly this season, not only with his application of his skills, his willingness to play off of other guys, and his performance with the small role changes. Really impressive, but he's been so affable. He's been so gracious about all the different changes that have gone on. Publicly being called out by the coach, not being included ever by Bobby or Masai when they talk about the future. They never mention his name. All that stuff goes on. He just keeps checking into the game, whether it's at the start or off the bench, playing his game, doing a good job of it. And I think he's, as somebody who was kind of looking at when he originally signed his contract, like, I wonder if he'll make good on this. And not to pocket watch or anything, just from the zooming out perspective. He's done like a fantastic job. And I can't imagine he'd be thrilled about going to the bench, but he's the guy that the Raptors, I think, are lucky how good he is, and the fact that he's probably not going to make waves when you put him there. Especially if they plan on re-signing him and getting to a number in the future, like that has to be consideration. Is that they don't want to piss a guy off right before he goes into free agency, because he could sign anywhere, and
Yep.
he's probably gonna hit the bench, and he's been super gracious about all that. So I think that's like just big shout out to Gary for that, because that's impressive, at least in a team friendly way. I'm sure there's a lot of like Gary friendly stuff going on behind the scenes where he's like, I need to have stuff happen for me to get the biggest bag, and I certainly hope he does. Precious, there, I love the Precious and Poeltl front court, especially since it makes the Raptors so weird and huge at the 3 and the 2. Pascal, Scottie, right? And then once OG comes back, who knows what that looks like. But I typically like size on an NBA court. And I think that the NBA kind of bounced back after being like the small ball was really popular because Golden State was the greatest team ever and that kind of stuff. But size on the court is like such an impressive thing to be able to do, in the Raptors finally will be able to do it. But so starting lineup sounds like we're all agreed on that. You said top 10 defense. You think, Trey, Kai, do
Yes.
you see a significant defensive ceiling for that starting lineup as well?
Yeah, I think with the addition of Jakob, it makes, it really depends if Nick Nurse is willing to use a more traditional scheme, I think, because usually in the regular season, like drop defense, most teams don't have the skill set to really punish you with that. And, when you got a bunch of guys like that are so great on defense, like Fred's on ball defense hasn't been good, but off the ball, I think he's been pretty solid. And then you got OG around and Pascal around. So I think, top 10 is pretty feasible, but it just depends if they just, switch to a more, drop heavy coverage instead of putting players in like more riskier positions.
Yeah. And Trey, the bench now. We're looking at Chris Boucher, who is across the NBA, I think, considered a good bench player.
Yep.
At the very least, should be considered that. You also have Precious Achua, who I think you could say the same. He's also, depending on the game you get him in, could be a very good NBA player. And then he has a good floor because of the defense. Then you also have Gary. Who else are you looking to round out the rotation? You have guys like Wancho. I can't imagine Delano, figures into your plans. Like, what does your ideal rotation look like now that we've kind of settled on a starting lineup?
I think ideally, if you want to round out the bench, it would probably be Malachi. He's shown a little bit of moments where he can operate as a pick and roll operator, and when he's hitting his threes, they're quite valuable just because the Raptors are lacking shooting even to this day. I think most likely they're going to stick to like an 8-man rotation because they need to jump up in the standings, and they're either going to have one of Scottie, Fred, and Pascal operate those bench lineups with those play finishers like Gary, Boucher, Precious, even Thad at times. But ideally, they need to reduce some of these minutes for these guys. So giving Malachi, even if it's 10 minutes, to operate as a backup point guard and not just a corner shooter would help a lot, and also just like see what you have in him.
I wonder if the natural progression for this team is that Pascal's minutes come down a little bit, Fred's minutes come down a little bit, Scotty's remain similar to where they currently are. I wonder if that's the way it's going to work out, and if they're going to try and get a little bit more dangerous with how they stagger with like Scottie centric units, considering the bench has gotten stronger now. I do wonder if that's the way they go, and but that's probably not the way to maximize winning games down the stretch. It depends how well they do as a starting unit, I suppose, to get them off to good starts in games. But recently, they've been doing quite well, but they've also been getting threes from Pascal and Scottie, which hasn't been the case all season, and even from Chris Boucher too. So that stuff could evaporate. Kai, do you have any different opinions on what the bench might look like here?
I mean, I pretty much agree with Trey. At this point, it would be nice to see what you have from some of the guys that you drafted, and it would be nice for the guys, some of the minutes to come down because it's more you can like justify the high minutes more like if you're winning and it's working real well, but you can't really justify 38, 39, 40 minutes and then you're still losing the games because at that point it just becomes really dangerous for the future of their career. So it's best if you just say let's give Malachi a few minutes, maybe run Delano out there sometimes, give my guy Jeff Dowling some burn, like just things like that.
I think, man, Jeff, I would be very interested if down the stretch of the season, if Jeff is able to get into a position where, because the 905 season ends before April, and there's going to be, I don't know, 6, 7 games in April or between the end of the 905 season and the end of the regular season in the NBA. And I wonder if Jeff might get a run at some of the minutes where they typically insert Malachi. And it depends on where the shooting is at for the rest of the roster, how it's been trending. I think Malachi's been a nice guy that in some games just plugging in and having a guy who, if the ball swings to him, you stand a decent chance at making a shot. I don't know if Jeff is there, but as far as like if the ball is humming around, putting the ball down, making reads, and having a little bit more punchy point of attack defense, Jeff has shown something in most of the games that he's played in. So I'd be very interested to see if that happens. But man, who's to say really? It's interesting how they're going to navigate this. The next question, of course, is we can stamp it early. Can this team win a playoff round? That's what I want to hear. And you know what? I'll let everybody set their own terms. If you want to name a matchup you think they can win, it doesn't just have to be yes. If you want to name the matchup and why, feel free. Kai, let's start with you. Can the Raptors win a playoff matchup? And let's obviously pretend they're going to be the lower seed in this scenario.
Man, you trying to get me in trouble. They already don't like the quick reactions, so you trying to give me more trouble. Um, I'm gonna say, I mean, it really depends on matchup, but most likely the Raptors probably won't win a playoff, seeding. I won't say it's like impossible, like they can't, because I think if you catch Cleveland,
This is
in
what
a
I
way where
wanted.
it would be like a good close series like 7 games, but I don't think they can contend with like the top of the East like Milwaukee and Boston, like guys like that, and like Philly. I don't think they have a chance in those, but like if you can catch like a team like Cleveland, like that Cleveland is great, but like maybe some of the experience whereas in the right direction for the Raptors. So I think they're capable depending on matchup, definitely. But I wouldn't say they should be favored or anything like that.
So let's say the standings right now. The Raptors are currently 10th at 28 and 31. Ahead of them, Washington, Atlanta, Miami, New York, and Brooklyn, 9 through 5. I could conceivably, just because of Brooklyn's new roster makeup, the fact that the Knicks, I think, will be okay through the rest of the season, and Miami, who knows, the Raptors could catch conceivably any team there. The likelihood that they pass all 5 is not high. The Cleveland matchup probably isn't happening unless Cleveland leapfrogs Philly and maybe Milwaukee. But you're looking at probably a matchup with Boston or Milwaukee. Do the Raptors have the juice for either of those matchups? Provided that, well, it looks like the league MVP probably won't be on either team they play, which is nice to know. But what do you think?
But wait, before I start, I never really specified what MVP Jason Tatum was going to win.
Oh my God.
Nah,
I,
bro,
I
have some
never
shame, bro. Come
specified
on.
what MVP he was going to win.
That
So I feel like I've been vindicated.
I
Personally,
never had a man in my life try and have his cake and eat it too this aggressively. I never in my days. This
Oh.
is egregious. Okay, yeah. Jason Tatum is the MVP. Okay, so anyway, Raptors versus Boston or Milwaukee. What are your thoughts?
Um, I I think they don't have I don't think they can beat either, but I do think they have a better shot at Milwaukee than they do at Boston with Boston. Just simply because like the nature of the Raptors system, they get punished by threes, and Boston is one of the best shooting teams in the league. So I just think naturally it isn't a great matchup, even if the Raptors may overmatch them somewhere with their size. But with Milwaukee, they're very straightforward offense. They haven't been the best offense typically with Giannis this season, and simply just because they don't have guys on the outside that punish you when you wall up against Giannis. And now with Pascal, OG, Poeltl, they probably present like one of the best chances of like giving Giannis like a very tough time. Well, I think that will lead into like a series win, no, but that could lead into probably a 6 game series where Giannis averages 25, 12, and 8 instead of
Mhm,
35. And he's shooting 45% from the field. And it's a very, very tough. But I think like overall, like when looking at even like the Poeltl trade, you kind of have to look at it in the aspect of like probably teams 5 through 10 now. I would probably favor the Raptors to win this series, to be honest.
mhm.
So going into next season, I'd feel very confident in them being a higher seed and knowing that they have probably more talent than a good amount of these teams.
That's a good point to make, and that's when you look at this team. If that's what you want for Scottie, then like this is the silver lining is that the Raptors did make their team better. If Scottie because Scottie's taken a leap this season, certainly. For the
Yeah.
people who were paying attention, they saw it from the start. They saw what he was struggling with and said, like, this is normal. He was meant to struggle with this stuff, but he's getting better at these other things. If he leapfrogs a lot of his limitations going into next season, then the Raptors will have be in a much better position to support his stardom or rising stardom with Poeltl on the roster and maybe star hunting in the summer or guys re-signed. They should be in a better position to support a young star than they were. Now, as he approaches his, I guess, max deal that he's eventually going to sign, that's where not having these good first round picks on good contracts with good talent to supplement him, that's where it starts to smart. That's where you start to feel it. But in the short term, this year, next year, the Raptors are definitely a better team. And if Scottie and Pascal are like a wonder twin duo and they head and like Pascal is still giving you 25, 8, and 7 or 25, 8, and 6, and they manage to be a team that, maybe next season, Milwaukee, it looks a little bit, it's scary hours for them maybe. Or maybe, Philly, Harden's gone, something like that. The Raptors can punch up at the top of the East. This season, though, it's going to be, a Herculean task. It's going to be tough. But you're correct. I'll get Cleveland, Brooklyn, New York, Miami, Atlanta, Washington. I give the Raptors a chance at any of those series. The tough thing is that we're not getting any of those series. I don't think so.
No.
That's a fine way to put it. Does anybody else? What Do you? Let's talk about Scotty then. Just as like the final thing. We know this team is set up to be better the next 2 seasons, or season and a half, or season and a third, whatever. Are you happy about that? And do you think that's going to be meaningful for Scotty's career? Because we know it will be for Pascal's at the very least.
I think for me, it's like certainly meaningful that he has to play within structure and try to fit with winning players. Like most stars you see, they grow up in structures where they have veterans around them and they figure out how to win, and their stardom helps like accentuate that team further. You saw that with Steph, Tatum, players like that who are winning from day one, and Scotty's in that situation currently. I think just like what I alluded to previously, like the Yakov fit is kind of a bit tricky, just offensively, just because Yak will take away some of the things that Scotty was excelling at like a
Hmm.
low hanging fruit level. But it will force him to have to probably become a better shooter, and B, be able to actually face up so he can use Yak as a real weapon with kickouts and lobs and things like that. So I think overall it's a plus for him, and him being able to being forced to try to win. You see teams like Houston where the structure may be worse for players, is useful and beneficial. And ideally, if you have within his year 3 or year 4 career, we hit on a star that you're then paired with this player who's super young, who knows how to win with a star in Pascal Siakam, and now you're contending. So I think overall it's a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it does lean quite heavily, or it makes you lean heavily on the idea that Masai and Bobby will figure it out. That like it's a tough way to see that you kind of make it through this summer, the rest of this season, while still maximizing the talent on the roster and remaining flexible into the future and understanding like this is a team that isn't capped out, that has avenues to upgrade and to get younger and to like I guess, pivot where they need to. All the great teams pivot when they have to and in a sensible way that maximizes them going forward. And I think that the last couple years probably wouldn't make people blindly believe in Masai and Bobby. They've had quite a few misses, objective misses that they would probably acknowledge themselves. But they also brought a championship. And I don't think I don't know. I grew up watching the Raptors. I know you did as well, Trey. Kai, you grew up watching more American basketball, you know. But I didn't think the Raptors were going to win a championship anytime soon. Kai, what are your thoughts on Scottie and the next couple years and what this team looks like around him?
I mean, I think Toronto has done kind of a good job letting Scotty, experiment at times. And I think they've allowed him to just develop at a pace that is, that's not going to sink the team down with him because they've surrounded him with a lot of talent. So it's like, it's not all on Scotty's back to, get the team wins. And, he has guys who can set things up for him, like Fred and Scotty in the pick and roll this year. I think that's worked pretty well and, like, getting Scotty some looks. And just overall, for the next few seasons, I like how they're trying to, put Scotty in a system where it's like you don't have to do everything on both ends. We just need you to, excel at your own rate. And, there's just like I like how there's just not a lot of pressure on Scotty to, really just take massive leaps. Like the leap he's taken this year has been really, really great, but it wasn't like some sort of all-star leap. And I just like how there's not really a lot of pressure for him to, excel in that kind of way. And it's just him, taking his time and just really just making sure he has the people in place to kind of hide his flaws because he's not the best defender, but he has a lot of good defenders around him. He's not like some great shooter, but he has some shooting around him. So I just like how they just like I said before, there's not a lot of pressure on Scotty to be great from day one and just have to carry the team to wins. Like I just like how there's not a lot of pressure on him.
That's that kind of brings up what Trey was saying about the fit with Pirtle, and also the fact that Gary gets more creation reps with the Raptors than he would on many other teams in the league. OG, despite disliking his role, probably gets more or had an opportunity to get more creation reps on the Raptors than quite a few other teams in the league. And if Scotty does develop his guard skills, his creation skills, the roster is right there to say, yes, we need more of that. You can have some of Fred's, provided you do well. You can have some of Pascal's, provided you do well. There are possessions here for you to take if you grow in this way. The tough part is if Pascal doesn't become a better shooter than he is now, with his shot die getting a little bit easier, that if Scotty doesn't become a better shooter, Jakob definitely isn't becoming a better shooter. That's not his game at all. Then you're still looking at a team that's like, we don't shoot in 3 of our 5 starting positions. And that's the tough thing. So it definitely is a bet on development, and it's a bet on just putting good guys on a roster. And Nick Nurse has to figure it out. And that's probably the most interesting thing about this team is that there's a lot of good players, but they have to figure out how they attack the problem of making all those guys maximized. A question probably not neither of us has the answer to, but Trey, Kai, we'll start with you, Kai. Any, I guess, leaving remarks for the listener base?
I say keep hopes up. We're going to the playoffs. I'm gonna stamp it. We're gonna make the playoffs. I'll say that. Let's go to the playoffs.
Okay, Trey.
Yeah. I would say like if we did this a week ago, I'd be much more sad. But now that I've had time to reflect, the team has gotten a lot better. The last 2 games have been very enjoyable, and I would be pretty shocked if they didn't make the playoffs. And I think whoever they play, they're going to get at least a game or two off of them.
If they don't make the playoffs, I'm in, I'm in a dark spot, man. I'm like, that would be I'd be shocked.
Brutal.
That'd
I'd
be
be
dark. For real.
whew, that there is a lot of like nightmare considering how many guys are up for contract this offseason. There's a nightmare scenario out there considering what they just traded. But I don't think that we enter the nightmare timeline or anything like that. I think that the team will be in the if not in the position they need to be in, at least approximately in that area. I don't think things go south in Toronto to the degree that this is now like a destitute franchise or anything like that. Um, I think at this point now, everybody here and most fans are used to success and like a great deal of it. That the Raptors, when we look at this team, we're like, this isn't what we're used to or what we've been accustomed to over the past 8-10 years. So like, damn. But still, you look at a lot of other organizations around the league, and the Raptors are in a significantly better position to pivot if they need to grow if they're allowed to do so, all that kind of stuff. Fellas, Kai, thank you for joining Trey's podcast. I'm the co-host, of course. Trey, I'll let you close this one out. We'll say goodbye to everybody.
All right. Like my co-host Samson said, like and subscribe on Raptors Republic and YouTube as well. Thank you, Makai, for joining our podcast.
No
First of
problem.
many. And I will see you
Ooh.
guys later.
See ya.